be very quiet. I'm hunting CEOs. They're endangered, you know. You're watching Textron, gang. Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel. It's Wednesday, and no, that was a little Elmer Fudd. But hey, CEOs are becoming an endangered species again. You know, when things get tight, you see this happen, right? The boys at the top who've been collecting the big bucks, all of a sudden, and unfortunately it is usually boys, but all of a sudden the screws get tightened and off they go. Of course, you know, don't cry for them. They all have golden parachutes usually that they're jumping out into. So there we are. Anyway, we have an interesting gang here for you this Wednesday. We've got some of my favorite people on the gang. Let me quickly introduce them to you. We have Chris Blask, Kate Scarcella, Mitch Ashley, and of course the Dean, Mike Vizard. Mike, what do we got?
Well, starting with the CEO conversation, the CEO of GitHub has decided to call it a day and is leaving the company. And allegedly, he's going to go back to creating additional startups. But the more interesting thing to me was that GitHub is essentially going to get pulled back into the mothership in Microsoft and become more of a mainstream element of their application development strategy. Mitch, I mean, I think a lot of us expected this to happen a while ago, but the question is here, what's your take on it? And B, will the rest of the open source community kind of take this as an opportunity maybe to have a referendum on whether they will still trust Microsoft as an open source company?
Well, it certainly could have that consequence if GitHub loses its sort of acumen and mantra with the open developer community, both open source and just being a platform for everybody to use. I don't think that's going to be the part that's going to significantly change. This is a sign of AI is not only coming for your job, whether you're a CEO or anybody, it's coming for your strategy. And this is a realignment of strategy, tying directly into Core AI, which is the group that is in charge of all AI for Microsoft. And while they didn't hint at this at their build conference, you could see that at the elevation of Core AI taking on more and more. They didn't hint anything about GitHub, but the time is right. You know, CEOs leave for a couple of reasons. One, financial performance is bad, or strategy change, or somebody just doesn't like them, right? So a new chairman doesn't like them, whatever it might be. So this is clearly a realignment of strategy. So I don't think Microsoft will go in and clean house and just change all of what's happening at GitHub. I'm also not naive enough to say they're going to leave it all alone. I think they're going to get much tighter connected into the AI strategy of what GitHub is doing and what Microsoft is doing, because there is sort of this uncomfortable distance between the two that has existed so far. You know, is it GitHub Actions and Microsoft VS Code, and where's the AI part of it? You know, it's a little murky, and I think this will help clarify that.
Well, I would characterize it as this: resistance is futile, as the Borg say. You know, Mitch, reasons the CEO leaves. Their stock option grant is finished. They don't like being part of the big corporate culture. They're startup people, open source people who are chafing under the big corporate thing. And I think that might be the case here. I do think that the CEO is, as Mike said, look, we were expecting this to happen a lot sooner than it did. But I think let's give him some credit, right? You know, and if I mispronounce Thomas, it's Thomas Dohmke, right? Or Dohmke. Yeah, it's Dohmke. You know, look, he took a company here, GitHub, when Microsoft first bought it, it was a repository. You gave software stars if you liked it. You voted for the software you liked. But it was an open source repo And then, they allowed you to maybe create your own on-prem version of it. But when Microsoft bought it, the idea was, oh my God, Microsoft already has a fantastic developer channel. They're strong in the developer world, but they just bought in, I think at the time it was 27 million, something like that, 22 million developer accounts. And this is going to make Microsoft the king of the developer hill. Well, a funny thing happened in the ensuing years. GitHub went from being just a pure repo, if you will, to the place where the action is, GitOps. GitOps. It became a CI/CD solution. It became an IDE. It became the place where Copilot, which I never knew if it was Microsoft or GitHub was Copilot, to your point, Mitch. That's where it lived. I think for most developers, the clippy thing that's going on in WordPress and Excel now is not the Copilot that they have in GitHub. It's much more powerful. The GitHub Copilot is a bit of a real deal compared to what we see in Word. So, I think, Thomas, job well done. Go back to your peeps, take your money, cash your options. Satya will keep growing this thing and make it more valuable for you, and go build your next adventure, right? He's leaving at the top of the mountain, right? He's not sneaking out in the middle of the night. He's staying on for the next 6, 7, or 5 months, whatever, 4 months, because he's leaving in triumph. That's a good way to go.
I think people will be closely watching GitHub Actions in the age of AI and Microsoft, because a lot of folks who do use it don't necessarily always drop everything onto Azure, right? They're kind of using that as a front end. But if Microsoft starts, thinks it's going to optimize GitHub Actions for Microsoft Azure, a lot of people may decide that those optimizations are maybe lock-ins. So to me, that's the thing that maybe I would keep the closest eye on.
I don't think Microsoft will be that heavy-handed.
No.
I think Microsoft of old would have been, but yes, I think it's a concern, but I don't think they will either. Sorry, go ahead, Kate.
I do think that we see this slow erosion of GitHub's independent spirit. Personally, I only because of the people who are putting into GitHub are going to other sources. There's been a slow, slow leak of people going and looking at other places to put their code. So,
Chris?
I think it's an interesting one because, I'm not a real coder. I just play one on TV, right? So I had a GitHub account, Chris Blask. So far back and did so little bit that I lost the password, and so now Chris Blask won, right? But with this whole civic AI thing,
too.
Right? But and it's not because it's GitHub. The civic AI canon was all written in documents and Google Drive and so forth. But as you look at principle, where you put something like that, it needs to be a testable repo kind of thing with version control. So it's MD documents, it's not executable code. But it's a fantastic repo. It's replicable, forkable. There's Arabic translations. It's all the same, but it's not about GitHub. It's about that type of strata. And so there's that side of it. And, we've just finished the CISA SBOM, cycle that Alan Friedman's leading. And the whole, again, it's not just about Washington with the SBOM thing and the supply chain. We're at an era of what's the next thing we do. And some of us are looking at that, who've been involved in those working groups, having conversations, in this era, this month, the next month. And my thought is that I want working groups to use GitHub to file all the documents and actually execute all of the programs. I would like to in supply chain, have a bunch of GitHub attestations, that have all the terms and everything you need, to actually exercise supply chain demonstrations at least. And in a lot of cases, those again, not about GitHub, but those sorts of capabilities are intrinsic for all these systems to coordinate with each other. So to our point, Microsoft taking over the Copilot as I was saying in the green room, the Copilot attached to GitHub is a really fascinating little creature. What they as a corporation do with it, I'm with you. Good, bad, otherwise, we'll see. But I understand.
I still go back to, and multiple things, of course, can be true at once. Your point about what he's accomplished, Alan. But the way I look at this is, it is trench warfare for fight for the developer right now, because it isn't just Microsoft and AWS and Google. It's all the small startups. It's the Lovables, the Cursors, the Windsurf. And while the numbers aren't as big, the innovation from the model creators, I mean, they clearly know that owning the developers is key to their strategy, whether you're Anthropic or OpenAI, and they're not going to give that up. So the field has widened for people that are fighting for mindshare of the developers in the world. And I think Microsoft sees this. This is my opinion. They've not told me this. I think Microsoft sees this as, we got to get our act together to play at an even more aggressive level, not meaning being the Borg of Microsoft, being the developer friendly, open developer friendly, and really go after the development market, because they could start to see some serious erosion to a significant advantage that they have right now. And no one else has the advantage that Microsoft has today.
Kate, to Alan's point, and the CEO did some awesome things here, but I felt like one part of the job that was kind of left undone was just making GitHub and those repositories more secure. I feel like there's been an opportunity to maybe think about putting more of the DevSecOps motion around the repository. We've talked about that in previous shows, but I felt like that was an opportunity missed.
I 100%. Thank you for bringing that up, Mike. That's not only a wonderful point, but we know within many of the GitHub that there is vulnerabilities in code that we know about, that we don't get rid of, that we just reuse over and over again. And this would have been a phenomenal time to do what we've been talking about with software debloating, right? And getting rid of code that nobody uses anymore, and, quite frankly, isn't even needed. We have so much information. I mean, cybersecurity is not just, one of the things that I talk about is that there's so much out there that we can't grasp, we can't get our arms around, which in itself is vulnerabilities that we have, just open vulnerabilities. So yes, I think that they totally have missed this, and I'm hoping that moving forward that they will really. I hope it's not over with. I mean, I hope that they really take this on. That would be such a huge help for cybersecurity people. So thank you for that. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, Alan, you're the host. So stop me if I'm completely off topic here. But what you're saying, Kate, as Firewire looks out in the near future, we're looking at adaptively configuring software for devices on the fly, because these things all sort of line up. Whether it's our devices are unusable because they are so packed with apps and settings that getting them to work ever and never touching them again is our only goal as technology people, having to help the rest of the folks. And to your point, because they're doing a million things they don't need to do, they're full of bloat and security problems, everything else. And I think with AI, the speed and the complexity, if we can do the supply chain end to end, if we can do some other things, then, for example, saying, here's the code base, here's everything on GitHub, trying to stay in the theme, and I want this device to do these things this afternoon, and put just that software on it and actually do it. And stop saying, I'm going to develop this stack and put it out there for 7 years. It's like, no.
Yes, absolutely. I'll never forget, being with IBM, walking into a CISO's, and him saying, cursing me out, and him saying, this can do so much, and I don't want it to do all these things. I just want it to do X. Why do you do this to us? So, to your point, Chris, yes, I mean, wouldn't that be nice? I think I'm hoping that cybersecurity becomes as easy as you walk into your home, you turn a lock, and that's it. That's what we need. And perhaps I'm delusional, but by golly, that's that's what I want. And GitHub with, going more into the Microsoft's core AI. Who knows? I mean, back to your point, Mike. I mean, is it a lost opportunity? Well, maybe it's not lost yet.
I'll tell you something though. When you think about how big a honeypot GitHub is, right? With all that code up there and all those accounts, I don't think they've failed at security as security failures go. There's a lot worse out there. Could it be better? Yeah, it could always be better. Could always be better. But I don't view them as being, a sieve, a leaky sieve here from a security point of view. They've tried. Will it be better as part of the mothership? I hope so. We'll see. But again, to Thomas Dumke's legacy, I don't know if that's going to stick to him. That it was they didn't take security seriously enough.
Well, we got to talk about the scale issue here. I just looked up the numbers. They have 420 million repositories that GitHub supports. They support over 100 million developers. So maybe opportunity lost.
I don't know if it's 100 million developers or 100 million developer accounts.
Accounts. That's it, developer accounts. Yeah, is what it is. So saying missed opportunity, okay, yes, but that's an opportunity solving it at a scale of 420 million repositories. And you could very easily piss off your community, especially developers when you start, getting in the middle of their work. And yes, we can make code safer, but I'm just arguing to say it's easy to say, it's much harder to do because at that kind of scale, it'd be different if I was running a repository of 2,000 different repositories and, 100,000 developers or 10,000 developers, whatever. The scale's so large.
But I'm sorry, but can't we agree that there is information out there that really is so old that we should just get rid of it?
Yes, there's
Blasphemy.
also
Blasphemy.
there's also file servers with files that have infections and stuff in it too, and we don't do anything about that either, Kate. So I'm not arguing that we shouldn't do this, but at some point, is it really GitHub's responsibility to clean up all that code? It's not their code; it's other people's code that they're hosting. They have done things to clean up their own repository of their own things that they offer they now are offering some security tools as part of their GitHub actions. So I think declaring that part of failure and blaming GitHub for it, I could blame a lot of people for that failure.
I think you guys are on to something. I think what we really need is bring out your dead code day once a year. Everybody's just
This is a Monty Python. It's like a Monty Python thing, huh?
Debloat is not a French word, by the way. Debloat.
Debloat. All right. I don't know anyone who ever deletes anything code-wise, but let's take a break. We're overtime here. We're going to come back to our B block here with CEOs at OpenText, the next trophy on the wall. You're watching TechStrong Gang.
Discover TechStrong Group, the epicenter of tech innovation. We're your go-to for reaching IT leaders and practitioners worldwide. Our secret? Impactful content that sparks awareness, engagement, and top-quality leads. With us, you'll access editorial websites, streaming videos, virtual events, custom content, analyst research, and more. Join our satisfied clients. Let's revolutionize your tech journey. Contact us today and tell your story to the world in the most powerful way with TechStrong Group.
Hey folks, yes, we're continuing to talk about CEOs. This time the CEO of OpenText is out. Going to be replaced by a temporary interim CEO while they go look for a new one. And the discussion that they seem to be having or the debate within the company is to what degree should they keep all these elements of OpenText that have been pulled together over the last few years, or start selling off some of these assets because maybe they're worth more independently than they are together. This is not the first time this conversation is being had at any company, Alan, but is there anything in here as you look at all this that says, hey, maybe they have a point, or is the former CEO, Mark Barranquilla, who built all this stuff as both CEO and CTO. Probably right, because everybody else is doing the same thing anyway.
Yeah. So first of all, Mitch, to your point about why do CEOs leave, this is a classic one, obviously. Change of strategy or philosophy from the board. They said, Mark, thank you for your time. I will tell you that, I don't know how many of you out here are familiar with OpenText, but you're right, Mike. Over the last 4, 5, 6 years, they've built quite the collection of baubles, software baubles and SaaS baubles. They don't always all fit together nicely, but it is an eclectic collection of assets. And some of them are more valuable and more profitable than others. But Mark himself, I had the chance, I believe, to interview him once. He was a kind of unique guy because he was the CTO as much as he was the CEO. And that might be the reason why they have this collection, right? Because at the end of the day, he was as geeky as any of us. And he was really, he wasn't the business suit guy. He was the techie guy. We've worked, full disclosure, TechStrong's worked with OpenText for many years. I love working with the company generally. They have good people. They have so many different areas that they play in that you can really get lost within it. However, I'll tell you, in my mind, the real story here is AI. AI is a threat to some of their business lines. They need to go all in on AI to keep their profit centers profitable. And my thought was maybe the board felt Mark and his team were not moving fast enough to embrace AI.
I would say they had a lot of AI initiatives, and they had this kind of notion of agents and trying to stitch together something that looked like a common UI across all these things. And it was an ambitious effort. But it also seems to me it's really hard to do that across a bunch of code.
Because they're so disparate. And they're also disparate things. They don't all kind of fit in like that. But if you look at who they appointed as the interim and the committee that they formed to run this thing until I guess they bring in someone, very sales oriented, very revenue orientated. And I don't want to talk out of school, but I think that's where their focus is going to be is, increasing revenue and then also perhaps shedding some assets or some, pieces that don't fit into this AI world going forward, that aren't core to the mission. These are the kinds of things you start hearing. They reported their financial results, not terrible. I happen to think OpenText is a solid company. I like them. I do think some of the buying spree over the last couple of years was a bit of Black Friday shopping and just throwing stuff in the cart because, hey, it was a good price. Will I ever use it? I don't know, but it was a good price. So I think there is some of that. And I think also the board felt, well, how long was Mark there? Like 13 years or something, right? I think they felt it was time for a change and they wanted to go in a fresh AI direction.
Alan, it is multiple things happening here because they reported their financials and they actually were quite good. Their cloud revenue, cloud bookings were up 32%. Revenue's not so much, but that's an emerging part of their business. And they did a $300 million share buyback program alongside doing a dividend bump. But that wasn't the whole story. They've been seeing a degradation or a decline in their full year revenue, somewhere between 6 to 10%. So while it's good, it's not pointed. It's not on that upward arc. It's going the opposite direction. So there's financial incentive. There's discipline around portfolio, right? How do all these products fit together? Or do we end up just selling to 4 different parts of the organization and, we have trouble cross-selling them? Let's make sense, rationale, bring these things together. So it looks like a platform. It is a platform and it operates like a platform and shed the things that don't make sense necessarily to do. And back to what I was saying in the first segment, AI. It is realigning. They have to innovate on AI. They've done some good things to this point, and they've been doing it for a while, but they really have to double, triple, quadruple down on AI to stay in this race.
All right. Alan, do you think they go private? Because it's a lot easier to re-engineer when you're private than when you're public.
Oh, you know what? No. Short answer, no. Because, to go private with the idea that you're going to go back out public at some point, Michael Dell could do stuff like that. I don't see OpenText doing that unless there was some big PE company involved who was going to take them private, right? I don't think they would do it absent that.
They're like 7 something billion market cap. So it's going to have to be somebody with deep pockets to get hold of enough of that.
There's got to be a big PE in there who's going to take it. And if if they do that with a PE, then it's Gordon Gekko type, right? The sum of its parts greater than the whole. Greed is good.
I was, full disclosure, I was part of the Micro Focus transition into OpenText. And what I will say, what I saw within the company is there was a lot of talk about AI, but you didn't, when you see trying to grab a bunch of different products, it's too hard. It's too many systems to try to put together and grab, and try to make some sort of AI strategy. So there were some good AI companies that were part of that transition. But again, the focus there wasn't a really, I think personally, a good understanding on how to take what they had and go forward with AI. It became more about, keeping the products, maintaining the products that they brought. And then how do they grab these pieces of AI and all these different products? And it really wasn't a good strategy, personally. And so I think you'll start to see things sell off. That's what I would do.
You look, Micro Focus itself was a bit of a conglomerate, right? Brought into another conglomerate. So there are a lot of disparate pieces here. I'm not sure. And working with OpenText all these years, I don't even know all the pieces. I don't know if they know all the pieces, how it all fits in.
I don't think they do either. Because they really have some amazing products.
Yes, they do.
But at the end of the day, I don't think you have somebody who understands all that's out there and then to bring it into a cohesive strategy. And again, there are some things that you shouldn't have. I'm a big believer of getting rid of things. There's just some things that you just need to let go in order to move fast. And
so we see you want to delete old code. Blasphemy, I tell you. All right.
Just delete it and see who notices. That's
Still
what we'll
can't
do.
believe that. All right, let's take a break here on Textron Gang. We're going to come back and talk a little bit about China syndrome. Well, China GPU syndrome. You're watching Textron Gang.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Hey folks, we're back, and the Trump administration is at it again. This time we're going to see folks in China who are using GPUs from NVIDIA and AMD are going to pay a 15% increase. I guess they're paying that, or I guess maybe AMD and NVIDIA will just pass that back to the government directly. But the United States taxpayer is going to be the beneficiary of all this. And I have a lot of questions about how all this might play out. But Chris, from your side, as a quote unquote American, do you look at this and say, well, does this just mean that there's going to be more demand for those GPUs out of China, and the overall cost of those GPUs is probably going to be higher anyway? So we're all going to pay more for these GPUs. So why wouldn't everybody just salute and say, well, this is great for NVIDIA and AMD?
Is there anything else to say more than that? I don't know. I mean, yeah. You've taken all my points. You know, I don't see the sense in this. I don't see it achieving any of the goals necessary. Yeah, the best I can do is so tomorrow. I'm on a panel on Salt Typhoon with CS2 AI, Derek Harp, and that crowd. And I've been looking at it. What I'm going to say about that, and I think it plays to this, right? So Salt Typhoon is, for everybody not familiar, is this Microsoft name for this, like if you read the articles, there's new Chinese, attack against infrastructure, but it's not. It's the accumulation of 30 years between the difference between what people like me and Kate, you might say, in our extremists, and the most extreme security people, there's a difference between that and what we've actually done. It's this gap. And China has just inhabited that. And just, and it's not any one thing, it's millions of little log files that are slightly changed, little configurations slightly changed. So we take AI and put it into that. And my summation is that the Chinese government right now could play our infrastructure like an orchestra. Like literally just, you could literally, play China. I bet you can play it better than I can say it, right?
Uh-huh.
And it's, so yeah, we just dive into this sort of GPU war thing. I don't know. I mean, does that make any bloody difference other than, moving some money around to places that I think aren't really great places for that money? No.
So, Mike, I've got a few things to say on this one. There's a lot to unpack here. First of all, you said John and Susie Q, taxpayer, are going to be the beneficiary of this. I didn't see anything about where this money's going and where it's going to be spent on. We don't know. Is this going into some slush fund to pay to stop illegal immigration? Is this Iran-Contra too? Who the heck knows where this money's going to or what it's going to be used for?
We're using it to demolish the Rose Garden, didn't you hear?
Well, no, that's already paid for by private donations on the East Wing. But here's the issue, and I wrote one of the articles cited here. You can't talk out of one side of your mouth and say, we can't send this technology to China. It's strategically important. We cannot send this stuff to China. We got to put in controls. We're going to sanction any country that plays like man in the middle, forwarding this technology to China. And then all of a sudden say, oh, wait a second, did you say 15%? You could have it. Hey, I want to buy a nuclear bomb. I'll give you 25. Yeah. Can I get a missile? That's
and personally, Alan, when I read your article, I'm not just saying this. I thought you're spot on, absolutely 100%. I personally and Chris. I mean, I understand. I really, to me, I feel like we've just given the Chinese the advantage.
Well, we've proven what we are. It's just a question of the price. I mean, it's not just the Chinese. When Russia offers,
right.
or someone else, we're not for sale. We're not for sale. We're not for sale.
Alaska might be up for sale.
Well, we bought it once. Let's not sell it back. He's meeting with them next week.
Who knows? I think is what you meant.
But here's the other issue, guys. The other issue is just from a separation of church and state, and I'm not talking about church per se, but the U.S. government is not a shareholder and partner in private companies. I'll have to admit, I'm a political science major. I went to college a long time ago. One of the things they taught us about what was the difference between socialism, capitalism, fascism. In fascism and socialism, which of course is including in communism, the government controls the means of production, right? In capitalism, private companies control the means of production. When the U.S. And that's my bigger problem here. It's the problem with calling for the firing of Intel's CEO and everything else. When the government is heavily handed in the operations day-to-day of private companies, you wind up with Putin's Russia. You wind up with that's one model. You wind up with the Chinese Communist Party being the big brother of the Chinese capitalist system, if you want to call it a capitalist system. That's another model. Neither one of those models are anything that resembles what America is or was, right?
And Alan, I totally agree. I mean, this is, I think, if we're not sounding the alarm about this, I was not a political science major, but I am so concerned about, the government getting involved especially in business that they don't understand. I mean, quite frankly, who understands? We keep throwing tech people, and I think one of the failures personally is that we are putting people in place that don't really understand the technology. And it's like, well, it's a big deal.
So the silliest argument that I've heard about all of this so far is that when you listen to the chip makers say, well, we need to sell these chips to China because otherwise they'll just go out and reverse engineer and build them themselves.
They're going to
They're
anyway.
already going out to build them themselves.
They're going to anyway. But let me give you a more sane counter argument, and it comes from Mark Cuban, right? Mark Cuban came out and said, hey, what are you guys upset about? We just did what we've been trying to do for a very long time. We increased the corporate tax rate by 15%, right? So if we start charging all of these, so it's almost like a reverse tariff. We don't charge you as a foreign company to bring in products to us. We're going to charge you an export tax to bring products to them. Now, in this case, it's very selective, but if you took that at a broader level and just added any American technology gets a 10 or a 15% tax added to it, and that money does go into the general treasury and not the Donald Trump presidential library, Mark Cuban says that's not a bad thing. So,
Alan, no, I think the mistake that we make, and I'm trying not to say this just to be critical of Trump, but we want to impart on him a political ideology. He does not have a political ideology. He is a deal maker. He will sell it. Hey, I'd like to sell you this table. Remember interviewing salespeople?
no, it was a pen, Mitch. It was sell me the pen.
The pen. If you'll buy that pen, I'll sell it to you. Right? And you combine that with nationalism and populism. That's really, if anything, aligns with some kind of an ideology. You know the right terms better than I do from political science. But I think, it's like anthropomorphizing robots and humans. It's like we're putting on this. Why does he do this? It doesn't fit our ideologies because he doesn't have one. So, I mean, there are maybe a few advantages if I try to put lipstick on the pig. Is, well, at least China's paying the 15% directly instead of us paying the tariffs into our coffers. Where that money goes is probably into the Republican National Committee or some damn place like that. Who knows where it goes? But I think we live in a world where there's not one model of what he's doing. He's doing every model that he think he can spin, and we'll see what comes out with Russia. Russia may be making chips as of Friday afternoon for all we know.
I'll go for a pig lipstick on this one, right? So to be clear, this is all incredibly stupid and bad for actual security and national security and everything else. However, as a security person and as an American, I think both of those are true. I have lived my entire life saying, okay, right now, and you've seen my boats, right? Hurricane storms, you're never going to get all the perfect things. You work it out. And this is an exercise of what, whether our system can survive, aggressive, intentional incompetence is the wrong word. What if our government did the exact opposite of everything we did? If we can still survive, that really proves our point, right? And this, Kate, to your point about so the whole GPU Salt Typhoon thing, this absolutely plays into China's favor. Let me say that in public. Nothing here is good for U.S. national security at all. But I didn't assume that China wasn't going to be able to get GPUs in the first place. I think there is ways to address Salt Typhoon, and they don't actually require any government support or a lot of money. So if nothing else, this forces us to evolve into the available cracks, which in this case I think are the right ones, but for stupid reasons. I mean, to be clear, this is not smart.
I don't see how a 10 to 15% increase on the cost of U.S. products overseas is good for business, because ultimately it will drive people not to buy our stuff.
Well, no, it incents them to reverse engineer it.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what they do very well.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But, it shouldn't be lost on us that the week before this was announced, Jensen Huang was in the White House having a private one-on-one with Trump, and I'm sure they cooked this up. And Donald said, cut us in on a piece of the action, and I'll let it happen. I'll call my people and make it happen. This is like going down to the Bergen Hunting Social Club in Little Italy and making deals.
Well, we do have kind of we're involved in these companies now. Just take the U.S. Steel sale that occurred. Yeah, we have a golden share in that way, one share, which is basically veto on any decision we don't like. It's not a financial
it's the same
share.
Thing. It is.
But it's control.
It's socialism or fascism. Both sides of the spectrum. It's government control of the means of production.
Exactly. So it could say, I don't like that deal you're doing with whoever, or I want you to favor this company or this country over that one. So what are you going to do? You're going to follow. Nice GPU business you got there. It's a shame if something happened to it.
Yeah. I'm telling you, I'd like your blessing to sell this olive oil. All right. That's all I'm going to say. I'm glad no one raised their voice here, and we remained calm in discussing it. And I will tell you the truth, though, with everything that goes on, I wonder why people aren't out in the streets more.
Yeah, I agree.
It is what it is.
Well, I think that's because, the other situations that's going on in the world, it's August, and all the criminals are like, well, they're only going to be here for 30 days. We're on vacation. We'll see you guys in September.
Could be.
And it's really hot out there right now.
Yes, it is. Ask the National Guard troops patrolling D.C.
Yeah.
But all right, let's not go there. Hey, this has been a great Tech Strong gang. Kate, Chris, Mitch, Mike, thanks for joining. Thank you for watching. As usual, we have a whole bunch of good Tech Strong TV content behind this, including some of our Black Hat coverage from last week. So check that out. We did some really nice interviews on the show floor there. So check that out. We'll be back tomorrow with more gang and more good discussion. Until then, everyone, have a great day. This is Alan Schimmel. We're out.